Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to wonderful Wednesday night's Bible study. This time that we set aside every week to dive into the Word. We have been in a series. We were out this past Wednesday night, but we have been in a series entitled Grace for Grown-Ups. Grace for Grown-Ups. Taking some of the passages from the New Testament that center around the life and words of Jesus, passages that are often difficult to understand. The first passage we examined was a woman who came to Jesus because she desired healing in her family. And because the woman was not of the same family heritage as the heritage of Jesus, Jesus responded to the woman by saying, first of all, he said, I am only sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Then he said to the woman, it is not fitting to take the meal that belongs to the children and give it to the dogs. And the woman said, I get all of that, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the children's table. And Jesus said to her, you got more faith than anybody I've met thus far. And he granted the request that she had. Today we're in John chapter 2 in the New American Standard Version, beginning in verse 13. It is also one of those unique passages. We began this 2 weeks ago, so this is part 3 tonight, or part 2A tonight, where Jesus goes into the temple. This is in the early part of his ministry. He does not like what he finds, if we can put it in modern vernacular, when he gets to church. As a consequence, we'll see in a moment that he takes a whip, plats it together, beats everybody out of the church who is doing wrong, turns over their tables, turns over their money in order to display how much disdain or anger he had concerning what they had been doing. This was actually the first time that Jesus did what we call cleansing the temple. It also occurs later on in the scriptures in Matthew 21, Mark 11, and in Luke 19. We read about the second temple cleansing. But what I want to point out in this series, as we did from the outset, is first of all the attitude that Jesus had or has concerning his house, concerning his people, and the attitudes that we ought to have. And then I want to be honest about why some attitudes have changed concerning the Lord's house. Many of you grew up the way that I did, and we treated the Lord's house as a sacred place and a sacred space for a number of reasons. We didn't worship the building. We didn't worship the ground, but there's certain things that occur connected to the Lord's house that deepen our connection to the Lord's house. Always remember this. It doesn't matter how long we live, and like everyone else, I want to live a long time. Dr. King said longevity has its place. But it doesn't matter how long we live, we still have longer on the other side of this life than the time that we have on this side. One day, all of us will stand before God, and he's not going to ask you about what I did. He's not going to ask you about what your neighbor did. All he's going to want to deal with is us as individual believers. And we want to make certain that what we do for Christ, we do it for the right reasons and with the right motives. And if we turn away from something, we want to make certain that we have the Lord's permission and the Lord's direction to do that also. So John's Gospel, chapter 2. Again, I want to welcome all those who are in the building, all those who are joining us online, all those who are on their way in. We are excited about what God is up to. John's Gospel, chapter 2, we will begin in verse 13 and read down to verse 25. Again, I'm going to be reading from the New American Standard Version of the Sacred Scriptures. Let's read these verses together. John chapter 2, beginning in verse 13. The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Passover was an annual feast, an annual celebration that commemorated the night when the Lord sent what the Old Testament calls the death angel into Egypt. And every house that had blood spread over the doorpost, the death angel would pass by that house. If you didn't have the blood sprinkled over your doorpost, the firstborn in that house passed away that night. To commemorate all that God had done during that special occasion, they were instructed to remember it annually. Would you let that sink in, Deaconess Brenda? That in order for them to remember what God had done for them, they rehearsed it on a regular basis. I think families need to get back to telling some old stories about how we got over. Sister Norman, one of the things my mom used to do all the time, I spent a great part of the earlier part of this day just going through my phone, highlighting as many photographs as possible and videos that I have of my beloved mom. But one of the things she was known for in my life was telling stories, the same story over and over and over again. Like the story she told about my grandmother telling her to go into the kitchen and cook. And she went in the kitchen and came back and said, there's nothing in the kitchen to cook. And my grandmother said to her, go back in the kitchen and cook what you see. There was a can, catch this, of salmon. I don't even know if they still sell salmon in a can. There was a can of salmon. And my mom went in, took that can of salmon, picked the bones out of it, as she described it, added some flour to it, and made salmon croquettes, and the whole family had something to eat. I heard that story over and over and over again. And every time I hear it, it reminds me that God can do a lot with a little if you let Him. And perhaps one of the things we suffer from is we stop telling the stories. We stop reminding people or informing people of how we got to where we are today. And unfortunately, if you don't learn how to value and appreciate your history, you will take your present for granted. You will take your present for granted. When I think about, folks who marched on the Edmund Pettus Bridge on what is now referred to as Bloody Sunday, simply for the right to vote. Just the right to vote. And then the notion that some people take things like voting with such a lack of seriousness in our modern day, when there were those who marched, those who were beaten, many who were lynched, who were murdered for simply pursuing the right to vote or the right to have taxation with representation. So for the Lord's people, He said, when I bring you out, I never want you to forget that I brought you out. So every year, regardless of where you move off to, every year you come back to Jerusalem to commemorate the night that I passed over every home that was covered by the blood. So according to verse 13, the Passover of the Jews was near. Jesus went up to Jerusalem, and he found in the temple those who were selling oxen and sheep and doves and the money changers seated at their table. Don't miss that. According to verse 13, the Passover was being celebrated. Jesus went up to Jerusalem to celebrate. Think about what he obviously had on his mind when he left home and the whole while he was on his way there. I'm getting excited. Which means before Jesus got to church, he had his mind on church. And when he got to his Father's house and saw that either, and I'll get to this in a moment, he didn't like either what they were doing or where they were doing it, one or the other. But whatever it was, it angered him so until he turned over tables after he platted a whip. He beat everybody out the church, flipped everything over, dumped over the money, and said, my Father's house shall be a house of prayer. You have made it a den of thieves. He had his mind on church before he got there. But when he got to church, he was disappointed because what he came to church for was the opposite of what they were doing when he got there. That leaves us a responsibility as a church that if people, catch this, I'm excited tonight, Elder Shay. If people come to church looking for the right thing, they ought to find it when they get to church. Something is wrong if church disappoints. If I'm about to tell you a restaurant that I went to recently. Don't hate. But recently I went to Popeyes. Let me tell you what they did not have at Popeyes. Steak or burgers. I was not upset that they didn't have burgers at Popeyes. You know why? Because Popeyes sells chicken. It's a chicken place. When I go to the chicken place, if I can't find nothing else, I expect to find some chicken. If you ain't got no chicken, lock the doors, put up a sign, and tell me to go somewhere else. And when people come to the Lord's house, I'm going to show you in a moment some things that they ought to find whenever you come to the Lord's house. All right. So verse 14, he found in the temple those who were selling oxen and sheep and doves and the money changers seated at their tables. And he made a scourge, that is, he platted a whip of cords, drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen, and he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And to those who were selling doves, he said, take these things away. Stop making my Father's house a place of business. His disciples remembered that it was written, zeal for your house will consume me. That's a quotation from Psalm 69 and verse 6. The Jews, this is the folks who were leading, the Jews then said to him, what sign do you show us as your authority for doing these things? They were saying to him, what gives you the right to turn over tables and run people off? And they asked him for a sign of his authority. Jesus answered them, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. The Jews then said, it took 46 years to build this temple, and will you raise it up in 3 days? But he was speaking of the temple of his body. So when he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the word which Jesus had spoken. Now when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover during the feast, many believed in his name, observing his signs which he was doing. But Jesus, on his part, was not entrusting himself to them, for he knew all men, and because he did not need anyone to testify concerning man, for he himself knew what was in man. Jesus is saying he was not impressed by any outward demonstration if it didn't begin with inward transformation. Did you catch that? He was not impressed with any outward demonstration if it did not begin with inward transformation. And what I want to do tonight, I want to follow up on where we started week before last on the mentality Jesus wants us to have concerning not the building, but what the building represents. So I want to focus on the attitudes, the frame of mind that we ought to have as it relates to the Lord's house, because it meant something to Jesus. They did not worship the place, but they were to reverence what went on in the place and what the place represented. The first thing we saw when we began this part of the series is this: what gives this place power? What gives this place power? Another way of saying that is, what should people be looking for when they come to church? What ought to be on their minds? You know what some folks look for when they come to church? They don't want to be offended. And that's not a bad thing. For a lot of times when we go somewhere we have never gone before, we want to make certain that we are treated well when we get there. I don't believe I'll ever forget, unfortunately. There's a store here in town that I used to shop at so much, Sister Muriel, until my closet looked like I was on payroll. I had these wooden hangers, you know, in the church world and in the business where I was in a suit multiple days a week, so I had to have a lot of them. And so the store I was buying them from, when they give you a hanger, the hanger is wooden, high-quality hanger. The name of their store is printed on the hanger. My closet was full of those hangers. And so I walked in one day in the middle of the day, needed to purchase something, and the store attendant nodded, acknowledged my presence, and I kept right on going to where I was going. I think it was the suit section or the shirt section at that time. Someone else came in right behind me, Dr. Allen. I mean, like 30 seconds behind me. And the store attendant greeted them the same way they had greeted me. But then they said to that person, "We have a whole section of suits that are 50% off." And my ears perked up. And I started turning towards where I thought they were saying the suits were. And I said to myself, whoever this person is who's coming in behind me, I can guarantee you this: they don't have nearly as much in their closet that comes out of this store as what I have. Why didn't y'all tell me about the 50% off sale? Now, I didn't ascribe a motive as to why they didn't tell me about the 50% off sale, but I will tell you what I did do next. I walked out. I have never purchased a suit from that store from that day until this one. You know why? I was offended. Whether or not I should have been offended, that's a whole other issue. But I was offended. Some people come to church, and what they're looking for is not to be offended. Everybody wants to be treated well wherever they go, myself included. And when we come into the Lord's house looking for the right thing, we ought to be able to find the things that we are looking for. And so we've got to be careful as members of the body of Christ to make certain that we represent Christ well, that we do our part in helping to reach the kingdom. Somebody ought to type in the chat, "I know that's right. I know that's right. I know that's right." All right. So I want to point out what gives this place power. Here is the first. God manifests his presence here especially. Now, God can show up anywhere, but according to his word, one of the primary places that he manifests his presence is where we gather together in his name. That's why I don't take this for granted. That's why I'm in a frame and a mindset of prayer when I do anything concerning the Lord's house, because he manifests his presence here. And if you can't sense the presence of God anywhere, you ought to be able to sense his presence in his house. God manifests his presence here. Second reason, or second thing that gives this place power, is that God receives his gifts here especially. He receives his gifts here especially. I believe in giving, but for a number of different reasons. I am not of this adage that the only reason you should give things to God is because you want things back from him in return. That's so wrong. So you are completely missing the boat when that is your motivation for giving. The reason we ought to be so motivated to give is that before the Lord before the Lord asks us to give him anything, it is in response to what he's already given to us. I was at a meeting on last night, and there were some folks who were talking about why houses should not be built in a certain neighborhood. It happened to be their neighborhood down the street from where they live. And they said, no more. Nobody else ought to come into our neighborhood. And they started to explain why they felt that way. One of the things they said was, anytime you build a house, you so disrupt the natural habitat in the environment until you do great harm to birds, wildlife, water, air, and noise. They came up with something I never even heard, Elder Shay. They said that this is what they said, that one of the biggest problems we create by living is light. That's what they said. They said there are a whole lot of animal species and birds that appreciate the dark. And when you move in with your street lights and the lights on the pillars of your garage, you are harming the environment. I thought about a number of things. Second thing I thought about was, let you go to Walmart and them lights ain't on in the parking lot. Birds are one thing, but safety is something else. You need light to see. You turn them on in your house, I don't see you bumping around in the dark telling me I don't want to hurt the birds because it's too dark in there. But the second thing that concerned me greatly, I really wanted to ask them, but I don't think the conversation would have gone well. If you think that building one house does so much damage to an environment, when are you going to pack yours up and get in a tent? Because what you're saying is it's all right for you to have one. I just don't want anybody else to have one. That's a dangerous way to feel. Dangerous way to feel. When I give to God, I am giving out of what he has already given to me. Think about how unjust it would be. This would be hard. This would be hard because it's going to be hard for little Kev to believe. But let's just say, for the sake of supposition, that I baked little Kev an edible chocolate cake. One that I studied, practiced, baked him an edible chocolate cake, chocolate icing on it, chocolate chips on the inside, cut it up into 10 equal pieces, handed him the whole cake, said, look, Kev, this is yours. Daddy made it for you. He said, thank you, Daddy. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you, Daddy. I said, by the way, can I get one slice out of the 10 I just gave you? For him to start explaining to me, well, Daddy, you do know now And I'm not going to eat all this one time. I'm going to eat this over the next 10 days is what I have planned. And Daddy, I've already spelled out in my mind a slice for the next 10 days. And Daddy, if you get a slice, it's going to throw my balance off. And I would be like, first, Sister Norman, I'd be like this. My first thought would be, but I gave you the whole cake. That would be my first thought. Here's the second thought. Do you ever plan to get another cake? You know how many cakes God has? For God to give you a cake and you not give him a slice from a cake cuts you off from the truckload of cakes he wanted to give you. No. Hold on. The Lord don't need none of this back. I'm keeping all of this. But he gave it to you first. And as it relates to money, somebody may be thinking, oh, well, the Lord ain't the one who put in them 40, 60 hours at chance. Who's the one who woke you up? Whose air were you breathing? Who was it that kept your mind and your body regulated? Who was it that kept your coworkers from not clicking and tearing up everything that they on the job? I said, I don't even work no more. I wait on the eagle to fly the first of the month. And hear what you've been saying. Ain't nobody going to stop the eagle from flying. Have you been watching the news? If you ain't careful, that eagle going to become a buzzard. We got to trust in God. Trust in God. We reverence this place because God receives his gifts here especially. And the reason the Lord's gifts are so important is because the Lord gives us the opportunity to receive from him and the opportunity to bless him in return. There's certain things I don't mind contributing to because they grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. All right. God manifests his presence here especially. God receives his gifts here especially. Number 3, God utters his words here especially. God utters his words here especially. And here, Sister Heather, maybe one of those things that the church world has done wrong that has limited our ability to reach people. We have mishandled our words. We have mishandled the opportunity to impact people positively. I've gone, over the years, I've had a number of different doctors. One of the things that I never wanted when I went to my doctor's office was like a magic show. If I go to my doctor, I say, Doc, my leg is really bothering me. It's a chronic pain. My leg is bothering me. And he says, pick a card. Or he takes out 3 cups, puts a ball under one cup, starts moving the cup around, and say, which cup got the ball under it? I'm like, Doc, you do know we don't have about 15, 20 minutes before your next appointment is coming. Can we get to what I came in here for? And he says, I know you came in here for health care, but what about some entertainment? Can I sing you a song? And could it be that one of the enigmas that has often plagued the church is the assumption that in order to draw people, they have to be well entertained? And you may be able to draw crowds with entertainment, but transformation requires the word. Transformation requires the word. And more than anything else, every time I hear the word, Deaconess Betty, I want to be transformed. The preachers, and I love all preachers. I do. I love all preachers. I do. I ain't trying to have lunch with all of them, but I love all preachers. I love everybody. Christians, I love everybody. But the preachers who have struck a chord in my memory bank down through the years are the preachers whose words I can remember because they were life-changing. They were transformative. They changed me. I grew up listening to Christian radio, and I would listen to people like David Jeremiah, John MacArthur. Some of them have kind of strayed in some strange directions in recent years. Dr. James Dobson had a program called Focus on the Family. Chuck Swindoll, Dr. D. James Kennedy were all preachers that I grew up listening to. I knew what time to leave the house to walk to school or to walk to the bus stop based on what was happening on the radio. My mom listened to Christian radio, so we grew up listening to Christian radio. My mom believed in having the radio on 24. We turned it off at night. We did turn it off at night. But all throughout the day, regardless of what was happening in the house, you could have had a TV on over here, but it was going to be a radio on, and it was going to be tuned to Christian radio. Not just singing. Singing is good. It has its place. Singing will make you feel better. But at some point, you need some transformation. Because not only do you want to constantly be treating the symptoms of a problem, you want to take away the root cause of the problem. And that's what the Word does. The Word has the ability to change the way that we think. And the moment we change the way we think, we will change the way we behave. And the moment we change the way we behave, our lives will change. I never shall forget, Deacon James, when it came time to purchase my very first house. I was going to be building the house. The builder informed how much money it was going to take out of pocket as a down payment to start the process. Now, I had good credit, but was broke. I wasn't poor. I couldn't afford all them numbers, all them letters. I just had the first two letters, the P and the O. Oh. Builder said it's going to take 3 to 6 months to build this house, and when the house is built, this is the money you got to have. Didn't have the money at that time. But for the first time, I had to go back and budget and look at the money I was receiving and how much the bills were and how much money I should have left over. I was ashamed. I will be honest. I was ashamed that I didn't have any money, even though I should have had money based on what the budget said. So I started following the budget, and I didn't cut God short. Because on any budget I've ever had, God is always at the top. Didn't cut God short. And so upon making out the budget and calculating how many months it was going to take before the house was built, the calculation said that I should have the money that was necessary when it came time to move into the house. And sure enough, just like the budget said, as long as I stuck to the plan, all the resources were in place when it came time to build a house. You ought to type in the chat. I know that's right. I know that's right. Build it, Rev. Build it, Rev. Type that in the chat. And all the resources were there when the time came. Now, before I met with the builder, I still had the same bills, still had the same job. The difference that allowed me to save up that kind of money was that I changed the way that I thought. Changed the way that I thought. Many of you may not, or some of you may not know the name Joe Cerulli. Joe Cerulli is the owner of Gainesville Health and Fitness. He grew up right here in this community, but when he was a younger man, he said that when he turned 30, he wanted to have $100,000 in the bank. And he planned everything around his life on having $100,000 in the bank by the time he turned 30. That meant that some of the stuff he wanted to buy, he didn't buy. Some of the places he wanted to go, trips maybe he wanted to take, he did not take those trips. He did not go those places. He set that money aside. And you know what happened? When Joe Cerulli turned 30, he had $100,000 in the bank. Made some investments in some smaller gyms along the way, stayed focused on what he felt his goals were. Now the largest, most popular fitness facility for Gainesville residents is Gainesville Health and Fitness, with more than one location in Jesus' name. All right. God utters his words here, and the words, we got to be careful with our words. Entertainment is not bad. You ought to have a good time when you come to church, but it ought to be transformative. I'm not coming here if I'm not going to be changed. If all y'all going to do when I come to church is make me feel better about my problems, but I still have all them same problems, at some point, I want to be somewhere where I run into the problem solver. All these people who came to Jesus throughout, catch this, all the people who came to Jesus throughout the New Testament, he didn't just rub on them and tell them, go back home and feel better about what your issue was. They came to him with withered hands. They came to him with blinded eyes. They came to him struggling to walk. They came with demon possession. They came hungry. And the reason they followed Jesus was not because he entertained them, but because he transformed them. I can promise you this, if I can't promise you nothing else. If you stick with this word, it will transform you. I am a living witness. It will transform you. Thankfully, I'm at the place now. Many of you know I have a business. I do work for people all over the country, and at a place now where I had to bring on an employee to assist with the business. But one of the things I do with that employee is remind them often. Every time I have a God moment, which is often, I remind them that this is not a personal business. This is God's business. Because I'm not going to take credit for what God is doing. I'm going to give God all the praise, all the glory for every door he opens, every miracle he performs, and him be in the miracle working business. I wish I had time to tell you. Him be in the miracle working business. God manifests his presence here. God receives his gifts here. God utters his words here. Fourthly, we share each other's lives here especially. Which means when you go through, a part of what lifts the burden off of you is the fact that you're surrounded by people who care. Some people may never remember what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. We share each other's lives. When you rejoice, I rejoice. When you mourn, I mourn. When you're trying to figure it out, I'm trying to help you figure it out. We share each other's lives here. And that's why I don't take any of this for granted. And my heart and my mind is in the direction of how can we help as many, catch this, my focus is on how can we help as many people as possible live their best possible lives. You know, one of the things that is indicative of a well-lived life, a stress-free life. And some of us are going to lose our minds because we losing our minds. And we need to reduce as much stress as we can. So that's number one. What gives this place power? Number two, who does this place harm? Who does this place harm? Who were the folks in John chapter 2 that Jesus was upset with? We saw it in 13 through 14. We saw it in 18. It was leaders. More than anyone else, the people in the Lord's house who were doing harm to the Lord's house were the leaders in the Lord's house. And we got some rules here around our church. They're very helpful. We don't talk about them much because we don't have to. But they're entrenched in what we do. The reason we have certain rules in place is because of what I witnessed in my early years of ministry, watching what other pastors went through. Like sometimes, this may surprise some of you, but sometimes people will get upset at the church and sue the church. Church I was connected with years ago in my early years, a lady was on her way into the church, driving onto the church's property, ran into the gate of the church and sued the church over the gate. She said she wasn't able to see the gate. The gate should have been better marked. And she sued the church over the gate, but kept coming to church. That's hard to do. It's hard to stand up here and preach the gospel and look out at you and know you suing us. But we got some rules around here to keep that kind of thing from going on. I've seen churches where someone in the church will sue the church, still come, and then stand in the church convening meetings of church members. That means you come in here mad with me or mad with the church. And not only are you here mad, but you're handing out paperwork in here to pull people onto your side and invite them to a meeting you having to further destroy or harm the Lord's church. The devil is a lie. You can stand across the street, but you ain't coming in here in Jesus' name. Why do we do those kinds of things? To protect all the reasons we're supposed to come here in the first place. You didn't come here for court papers. You came here because the Lord's presence is here. He receives his gifts here. He utters his words here. We share each other's lives here. So the people who do this place harm, unfortunately, are often leaders in the Lord's church. All right, the third thing I want to share is this. Number one, what gives this place power? Number two, who does this place harm? But here's number three. This is important. We learned in number two that it was leaders primarily who were harming the church. It was leaders who were responsible for all of that wicked stuff that was going on in John chapter 2. But here's point number three. When did they start to desecrate this place? Which means, because sometimes the question is, well, Pastor, if leaders would do some crazy stuff, who put them in leadership? How did they end up in leadership? And here's the truth. A whole lot of people start off doing well, but they stray away. And I want you to see in verse 14 what caused these people, these leaders, to stray away. Look at verse 14. It says, and he found in the temple those who were selling oxen and sheep and doves, and the money changers were seated at their tables. Now, here's the part I don't want you to miss. These leaders strayed away when they took a legitimate practice and allowed greed to take it over. Started off legitimate. They got greedy along the way. And if there is anything that has the potential of corrupting a leader, it is when greed gets in the way. Some of us, the New Testament says that before you elevate a person to leadership, you need to watch them for a long time to make certain that they are mature enough to handle the responsibility. Same thing is true in all serious lifelong relationships. You got to watch people for a while to know that they are mature enough to handle the responsibility that you are going to place on them. And these leaders, most of them, the reason they were elevated to positions of leadership is because they had relatives who were also leaders. So a nephew got elevated, a son got elevated. But just because your daddy was a cool dude doesn't mean you got all the sense in the world Somebody don't type that in the chat. I know that's right. I know that's right. I know that's right. And the problem occurred with them being swayed and allowing greed to take over. In the Old Testament, you read about a prophet named Elisha and his servant whose name was Gehazi. Elisha was gifted to perform miracles, and a wealthy military man had a skin disease. And Elisha said to the military man, go down to the Jordan River, which was a muddy river. But he said to him, go down to the Jordan River, dip yourself under the water 7 times. And if you dip 7 times, your skin disease will be completely taken away. You know what the man did eventually? He goes to the Jordan. He dips 7 times. Preacher called it 7 ducks in a muddy river. Was the title the preacher gave. He dipped 7 times. His skin became like the skin of a precious newborn baby. First thing he said was, preacher, he said to Elisha, I want to hook you up. I want to give you gold, silver, and garments. The preacher responded, God's gifts are not for sale. That's not why we're here. The servant, however, heard what the preacher said. And the servant said, the preacher don't want the money, but I want some. And so not only does he run the man down, he lies. And he said, my master spoke too quickly when he told you he didn't want anything. He's changed his mind. Here's what we want. And he gave him a list. And the wealthy soldier hooked him up, gave him all the stuff. He takes the stuff, hides it, goes back to his master. And his master, God had already revealed to him everything that he had done. And he's like, dude, God has everything. Why are you trying to get trinkets that will soon pass away? As a consequence, the leprosy or the skin disease that was washed off of the military man jumped on the servant. And he was a leper or leprous until the day that he died. Greed got in the way. Now, everything that was going on in the temple was necessary. Animals needed to be sold or bought and sold because a part of the Passover celebration was the sacrificing of animals. But those who were traveling long distances, it was too much of a hassle for them to travel with the animals that needed to be sacrificed, so they would buy them when they got to the temple. Also, they were under Roman rule, and many of them, their money had Roman inscriptions on it, and they had to pay what was called the temple tax. But in order to pay the temple tax, you couldn't pay it with a Roman coin. You had to have original Jewish currency. So someone had to exchange the Roman currency for the Jewish currency. The problem was not what they were doing, it was how they were doing it. They were cheating. If you said to someone, this dove weighs 1.5 pounds, and we're going to charge you $10 a pound, but then you hold your finger on the scale to make it appear that the dove weighs more than it actually does, and you are robbing the people who are coming to worship. Is there something wrong with making a profit? Of course not. Nobody would be able to stay in business if they didn't make a profit, but you don't have to cheat people. You should not prey on people or take more from people than what you actually need or what you actually deserve. And they were using the church as the attraction to bring people to themselves so they could rob them and cheat them. If you read verse 14 in the Message Bible, or this whole set of verses, one of the things that the Message Bible points out, it says that loan sharking was going on in the temple. That is that they were taking one sum of money but you had to pay back a much larger sum of money down the road. And they were using the Lord's house as the method of attracting this. And that's dangerous. And I think a critical thing we've got to be careful of in the body of Christ is when we start off with a good motive of honoring God, but then we learn that sometimes people are gullible and they can be taken advantage of, and we decide to go that route instead of doing it the Lord's way. I want to do it the Lord's way. I want to be honest. I want to be fair. I want to be upright. I want to be just, because I'm not relying on anything or anyone to take care of me. I'm trusting God to take care of me because I've seen him work. I've seen him work. You ought to type that in the chat. I've seen him work. I've seen him work. They started off with good motives. Good motives turned into bad motives. And the danger is good motives become bad actions one step at a time, where you start making little bitty compromises, one step at a time, little bitty compromises. Buying stuff at the gas station from people you know didn't buy it wholesale. Man, they hollering at you, say, come over here. I got this TV for $50, 99-inch. For $50, I got it over here. Don't worry about where it came from. It was from the other side of town. And your mind starts thinking where you can put a 99-inch TV. And then here what we do. Here we do, Elder Shay. Here we do. What about 40? And then we got nerve to show up in church talking about the blessing we got. The Lord opens doors. Somebody tried to sell me something for $40, something for $50. I bought it for $40. Won't he do it? And you buying hot stuff. Starts off one at a time. Starts off sticky notepad from your job. And it's pens. And it's paper clips. Then you got something going on at the church and they need printed programs. You took a whole ream of them people paper. Before long, it's a whole fax machine, copy machine, company car. They took all kind of stuff from the people. Starts off small, one step at a time. Before you know it, you're way out in the deep water because you started off wrong. Number one, what gives this place power? Number two, who does this place harm? The answer is leaders. When did they start to desecrate this place? It is when they took a legitimate practice and allowed greed to take it over. Here's the last thing, and I'm headed out. Who protects this place? In John chapter 2, verse 13 through verse 17, we learn who protects this place. Again, verse 13, the Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And he found in the temple those who were selling oxen and sheep and doves and the money changers seated at their table. And he made a scourge of cords and drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen, and he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And those who were selling the doves, and to those who were selling the doves, he said, take these things away. Stop making my Father's house a place of business. I'll tell you who protects this house. The people who protect the sanctity of the Lord's house are the people who respect his presence, respect the fact that his gifts are received, they respect his word, and they respect each other's lives. Which means, let me give them to you in reverse. You're careful how you behave in church because you know people show up to church with real problems. Sometimes I wish you all could trade places with me on any given Sunday morning. Because I stand up here, or any given Wednesday night, but certainly on a Sunday morning, because I stand up here and I look into the faces of real people who are dealing with real issues like grief, trauma, anxiety, financial frustration, family frustration, psychological frustration, physical frustration. In the last 2 weeks, I've gotten calls of people in accidents. I've got calls from people this past week who were diagnosed with serious illness. I don't have time to play with those kind of folks when they come to church, because they didn't come to church to play. They came to church trying to figure out, Lord, what am I going to do next? Lord, what about my kids? What about my family? What about everything that's coming along behind me? I ain't got time to play with them people because they're going through real life issues. That's because we share each other's lives when we come to church. But then God utters his word when we come to church. I want to be careful to create an environment where people can receive a life-changing word. Catch this. Not because I am a life-changing preacher or speaker. It is because the word will work if you work it. Ooh, y'all ain't gonna like this. Y'all ain't gonna like this. Some people say, I want to go to a church where the Spirit is moving. That's good. And you walk in, the music is the bumping and jumping. That's good. I love all that. Organ, screaming. I love all that. People dancing, people clapping, tambourines, the whole nine. I love all that. But then you'll turn on TV on certain stations, and then you'll see other folks in church. And everybody's sitting down, ain't nobody moving. They got a Bible on one knee, a notepad on the other. And it's quiet. And the preacher ain't broke a sweat. Bible on one knee, notepad. You know what we say? That's a dead church. Follow them people home, they got one. Some of us will jump as high as the ceiling and leave as broken and destitute as when we came in. Maybe there's something to having that Bible on one knee and the notepad on the other. What you writing down on that thing? Because sometimes what you write down is, I've been mismanaging my finances. I need to get out of debt. I need to be debt-free. A lot of my stress comes from these bill collectors who keep calling my house. If I pay these people or stop getting stuff that I can't pay for, these people won't be calling my house. I'm going to write that down. Pastor said the higher my credit score is, the lower my interest rates will be. So I can buy more house or more car for less money. I'm going to write that down. Pastor says I ought to leave something more behind for my children than a set of pots and the transmission out of an 85 Cutlass. Maybe I can leave an inheritance so that maybe some of the struggles that I had, my children and grandchildren won't have to have. I'm going to write that down. Church ought to be life-changing. Church ought to be life-changing. Funniest thing, it's not funny, it's tragic. A tragic thing that happens at a lot of urban funerals We go to a funeral. After the funeral, we eat what helped to put the person in the casket. And we eat it at the church. Whole bucket of fried chicken. I never forget this, and I'm done. It's 8 o'clock. I'm done. During the height of COVID, there were a number of things that struck me as odd, and I have personal friends that this applied to. One of the largest problems that doctors had during COVID with treating COVID-positive patients who were in the hospital, the problem they had with them was convincing them that they had COVID in the first place. Because they had been told that COVID was a hoax, vaccines were ineffective, but they in the hospital. Now, here's a question a lot of people ask Sister about Norman, is why did they go to the hospital if they didn't believe they were sick? They didn't. They didn't go to the hospital voluntarily. They got so sick until their family members called an ambulance, and the ambulance took them to the hospital. If it was left up to them, they'd have still been home. And so the doctor struggled with convincing them they were sick because they were convinced in their minds that COVID did not exist. Dear friend of mine, loved him like family, did not believe that COVID was real, did not believe that vaccinations were necessary, contracted COVID, went in the hospital, never came out. Guess who showed up at his funeral? The same friends who told him that COVID was not real. And this blew my mind. At the funeral, they talked about how people should not believe what the government was telling them about COVID and vaccines. And they refused to wear masks at the funeral. And I'm watching that because I wasn't there. I watched the video after the fact. Because they told me he was gone. I said, let me go back and watch the funeral. And I listened to them. It blew my mind. Brag about the fact that here lies a man who did not believe in the science of COVID and the science of it. He'd gone. And y'all standing in here with no mask on in the height of COVID. Saying he held on to his convictions. He held on to them, all right. He held on to them a little too long. And now his family has to deal with all the aftermath of what more than likely could have been avoided if he would have had a shift in his thinking. I want to be a part of something that is life-changing. And nothing changes lives like the word. Don't let anybody fool you. The pure word. Not word mixed with a scheme, but the pure word of God. And you need to get as much of it as you can. Amen? Let's give God a great big hand. Great big hand. We're standing. We're standing. We're standing. I want to pray with you. I want to pray for you. We're headed home. Father, in Jesus' name, thank you for manifesting your presence in this place. Thank you for the gifts we receive in this place. Thank you for the word that is uttered in this place. Thank you for the lives that are shared in this place. Help us to keep our eyes on you. Stay focused, to never be distracted, to never take that which is legitimate and allow ourselves to be overcome by greed and move in the wrong direction. Thank you now for this privilege we have to gather in this place. Watch over us, guide us, protect us, transform us each day and each night. In Jesus' name, Amen. Let's give God a great big hand. Great big hand. I love all of you. High five somebody and tell them, I'm glad you were here tonight. I'm glad you were here.